Welcome to this exclusive discussion as part of India Investor Forum 2021 presented by The Economic Times and Sher Khan. I'm your host, Pallavi. The next 1 hour, we're going to discuss about investment strategies for risk-averse as well as risk-taking investors. What could be the best ways for retail investors to invest in equities in the current scenario? What should you learn from the investment mistakes of others? What are the things that you should avoid? And what are the strategies that you need to keep up? I'm happy to be joined by a panel of experts. To begin with, I have Mr. Gautam Kalia, Head Investment Solutions, Sher Khan by BNP Paribas. I'm also being joined by Manish Jain, Fund Manager, Ambit Asset Management. Mr. Amit Kukreja, Wealth Advisor, Certified Financial Translationist from FTI USA, has also joined us on the panel. Mr. Kaustubh Bellapurkar, Director, Fund Research, Morningstar, is also joining us on this discussion. Welcome all of you on board.
Thank you. Thanks, Pallavi.
Thank you.
As we're talking about the current scenario and the kind of risk and the kind of volatility we're witnessing, my first question would be to Gautam. Do you see the current market as risky, or you look at it as an opportunity for equity investors? What is your take?
Great question, Pallavi. This is a question that we are asked a lot because investors' first question they ask is, the market so high, should I invest now? So the reality is that there are opportunities at every level of the market. The index is, just a bunch of 30 companies or 50 companies that people track, but really there are opportunities at various sectors and various sizes in the market. In fact, we are looking at a set of 8 to 10 opportunities currently on the stock side, which we call fallen angels, because we see value in them, good companies where we see value. So even though the market's done quite well and it's near record highs, you have these opportunities. So really the idea is to cut out the noise and make sure that you focus on looking at the right opportunities and investing accordingly.
Right. Moving on to my next speaker, Amit Kukreja. It's very natural to get carried away in such a scenario. Like, everybody wants to join the bandwagon when the markets are at record highs, but whenever there's a little bit of correction or there's some kind of a downtrend, suddenly the mood of the investors changes. What are your initial thoughts, Amit?
See, Pallavi, it's behavioral finance, right? It is the emotional side of brain that always activates the decision-making process. So we have to understand that how do we differentiate our practical decisions from emotional decisions? Money is a very sensitive topic, and people join very late in the markets when they see a lot of people have made money in their vicinity or people in their circle, and then they exit when the market starts to crash. So it's on the psychology side, it's on the behavioral side, and if the person is conscious about how his emotional decision needs to be segregated from the practical decisions based on the market dynamics, I think he can do a good call on his investments.
Right. Kaustubh is also with us, and he heads Morningstar. He's the Director of Fund Research there. Kaustubh, any observations on the current trend and how investors are behaving at this point in time?
So I think there's some interesting trends, right? Pallavi, if you look at it, the markets have obviously been, after the correction, the sharp March 2020, there was a pretty quick recovery, and we started making new highs. And we've seen a reasonable bit of volatility in the recent past. But I think this is not something that's new. It's happened in the past. It will happen again. I think from an investor's perspective, and like Amit very rightly said, it's a behavioral sort of angle where you need to tune yourself. You know that equity is a long-term asset class. It's not going to be a one-way street. There are going to be ups and downs, but you need to kind of stay the course, have the right attitude, the right investment horizon. So, risk is there if you don't have the right investment horizon or the right appetite for, to the ability to take risk, right? So I think if that's the case, then don't be in the market, look at other asset classes. But if you have a good investment horizon, you understand the elements of risk that you can take, we definitely, and we're seeing that, right? A lot of investors are coming in, they're coming with various expectations. I think that's the other thing that's very important. Set your expectations right. Do not have unrealistic expectations, because the last 15 months, if anything, is probably, peg the expectations of a lot of investors to unrealistic levels. And I think that's a very important message that, to start with, that always come with realistic expectations. If it surprises you on the positive side, great, but don't come with your unrealistic expectations to start with.
Right. Moving on to Manish, well, there's a famous saying that what we learn from history is that we don't learn a thing. So, Manish, what are your views? And also at this point, what should be the right approach for, being part of the current market conditions?
No, Pallavi, I think what you said is absolutely correct. And when you look at this thing in context of the market, I think investors, especially retail investors, being caught in the cycle of greed and fear, right? Everybody rushing in to sell off, when the first wave struck us and the market kind of corrected by 25, 27%, Nifty was kind of touching 8,000 levels. Everybody wanted to sell off and sit on cash at that point of time. And as soon as the market hit 10, 11,000 index Nifty levels, everybody wanted to wait for that inevitable 1,000 point correction, which actually never happened, right? I mean, the market just continued to rally. And when you look at the whole rally at the index level, on paper, we have seen so much of, wealth being created. But actually at retail level, not many people have been able to participate in that because of this whole cycle of greed and fear. So I think at this moment, if you're coming into the market, my advice to retail investors would be to remain objective. Have a more forward-looking view rather than a historical view. Valuations need to be unlearned first to be learned again. Just because something has traded at a certain multiple historically, it doesn't necessarily mean that that multiple cannot relate to another level at this moment. So have a more forward-looking view to valuations. There's still a lot of money to be made as far as the equity markets are concerned. You need to just focus on the right sectors and the right stocks. And once you get all those bearings together, have a slightly longish term view as far as investments are concerned, at least 3 to 4 years, 5 years, maybe. And you'll see the value getting unlocked, and the quantum of money that you can make from here onwards is also going to be very surprising, even in the context of the rally that we've seen in the last 1.5 years.
Right, right. Coming back to you, Gautam, we're talking about the different approaches, and also, that we keep seeing this in the markets. It's very natural, and that's how the process is. But investors may or may not understand. Every time there's a dip, they think of taking out the money rather looking at it as an opportunity. So, according to you, what is the right approach for taking part in this any kind of market momentum, be it a dip or be it a rise? How do you look at it?
Right. So I think a lot of clients focus a lot on returns and try to generate returns from a timing perspective, or what they can do in terms of cutting costs or things like that. I think what they need to keep in mind is that time is much more valuable, important for the compounding element. And that's really what determines wealth creation. And that's what we keep telling our clients to do, that don't look at it from a 6-month perspective. Maybe you are smart or you're lucky and you are able to make that extra 3-4% because you bought at dip and you got the bottom right, but really what's the big idea? So the first question we really ask our clients is, what do you want to do with your money? And when the client then starts thinking about how he or she really wants to use the money, that's when you get the perspective necessary to kind of take the correct investment decisions. So that's really the approach. So as long as you're asking yourself the right questions, you're going to make the right investments. The problem is that most of us we frame the problem incorrectly and we ask the wrong questions. We are always try to figure out whether I can get 2% more or 3% more, or save 1% here, but that really is not really the way to wealth creation.
Right. So we know that it has to be for long term if you're looking at equity markets. I now would like to ask Amit, how would you suggest taking gradual steps or making some lump sum investments in the equity markets if somebody is looking at long term investing, and maybe what are the best possible ways, if you can enumerate some?
Well, we have always been an advocate of monthly investments or regular investments. We call it SIP, because what SIP does is it not only diversifies your risk, but it also does cost averaging for you. So if you are very clear that you have a long-term horizon, let me quantify long-term in my head. And for the audience, long-term, according to me, is more than 7 years or 8 years, given what the market valuation is at the moment. So if you have a long-term horizon, do monthly investments. If you have surplus money, I would still say put it in debt and set up your STP calendar, which is systematic transfer plan. And accordingly, over the course of next 24 to 36 months, let your STP move your money from debt to equity. And if you have monthly surplus, which is not large enough as a chunk, then you can put your regular SIP in the equity investments. And this has to be driven by the financial goal planning. It should not be a random equity investing plan. It should be mapped to a financial goal, because what matters the most is your perspective around why you are accumulating this money and why you are trying to enjoy the compounding and the equity market returns. So map it to your financial planning goal and then accordingly do your equity investments.
Right. So the first step would be to, knowing, what you want to do with that money before you move on to making any kind of investments. I'll now would like to ask Kaustubh here, what are the most common mistakes you observe? You must be getting a lot of questions also, like those who, subscribe to Morningstar and the research reports that come out. What are the common mistakes that one needs to avoid when the markets are at, record highs or near record highs?
Yeah, great question, Pallavi. And I think, I'll just take a lead from what Gautam said earlier, that people try to time the market. And I think that is one of probably the most, common and dangerous mistake that people end up making. And, Amit very rightly said that valuations are a little high, but it doesn't mean that you stay out of the market. You stagger your money and come in. And let me just throw some data in here, which really proves the point that time in the market is more important than time in the market, right? Mm-hmm. We saw this global study that my global colleagues had done about just the US markets and looked at monthly returns for the index versus cash, say a fixed deposit rate or whatever. How many months, the best months, accounted for the outperformance of the index versus the benchmark? And the study that came for the global markets was that just 6.7% of the overall months. So imagine out of the last 10 years, only 8 months accounted for the entire outperformance. So if you're not invested in the markets in those 8 months, and those 8 months could be at random points of time in the last 10 years, you could have actually not even beat cash returns, right? The same thing we ran for India, and the result was exactly the same. 6.7, you could break it in different time periods, but the moot point is that you can try timing the market, they will always fail. There is no way that you can get lucky, but systematically, you beat the market by trying to time it. So the best strategy is stay invested for long, invest regularly, like Amit said. And I think that's the first common mistake, which we want investors to avoid doing, like trying to move in and out of the market. And the other thing which is very important is, we spoke about goals, create an asset allocation framework. So equity is one of the asset classes that is a very important growth asset class. There are other asset classes that are equally important for various goals that you generate. Keep focus on that. Keep a focus on your goals. If the markets have run up, you want to look at maybe potentially rebalancing to a certain extent. That doesn't mean, back in 2020, people started thinking markets have chopped off. Should I start reducing my equity exposure? So equity exposure already dropped. They'd look to cut it more. Rather, you should look to rebalance it up to your level that you want to take that. So probably the two most potentially harmful mistakes that investors make in their portfolios, and there are many more that we probably discuss through the course of the conversation.
Right. So moving on, we talked about the mistakes. We talked about how people are only chasing returns and how it really can impact their investment. I would like to know from Manish, how important is diversification? As Kaustubh just mentioned, equity is one of the asset classes, and maybe depending on the kind of risk one wants to take and the kind of years he or she wants to give into his investment, that probably will decide. But according to you, how asset allocation impacts the investment portfolio, and how does it impact the return? Manish?
No, I think it's a single most important decision that you can take, right? Which is how to allocate your assets most optimally. And, you can't be over-diversified, you can't be under-diversified. You just need the optimal amount of diversification. And like you very rightly said, it depends on a number of factors, right? In terms of what is the investment horizon that you're looking at, But I think most important question that I think as an investor you need to ask yourself is that what is the purpose of investing? What is it that you are intending to do with the money once that time frame period ends. Is it your daughter's marriage? Is it, children going abroad? Are you looking to create a retirement corpus? Is it a generational wealth transfer aim that you're looking at? What age bracket you're falling into? Rather than falling into the trap of having a return, percentage in mind. Because ultimately, if you stay invested for long periods of time, right, and if you look at the decade between 2000 to 2010, and when the economy as a whole does well, I think you make returns in pretty much every asset class, right? 2% less here or 2% more there. I think pretty much everything fires on all cylinders. And if the going gets bad, I think you pretty much never make return anywhere at all, right? Which is what we've seen in the last 1 decade or so. So the fact of the matter is that having just the right balance between real estate, gold, debt, and equity is, I think, one of the most important factors. And just 2 questions that you need to ask yourself is, how much of a risk appetite do you have? And what is the purpose of investing? What is it that you're looking to do once a period ends with that corpus of money, rather than just getting focused on the return part of it?
Right. In fact, Gautam, like we're talking about age as one of the factors. According to you, what role does age play? And do you really go by the 100 minus age formula for equity exposure? And also, what are your thoughts about how can an investor evaluate how much risk? I mean, one needs to know what, how much risk can I take? But is there a process? Can you help us with that?
So 100 minus age is a good thumb rule when you don't know the client, or when the client does not know anything about investments. But really, I've managed money for clients who are 80 years old and have 90% exposure to equity, and they are quite uncomfortable with that 10% exposure in debt. Okay. So they don't want any exposure to debt. So really, because their perspective is for intergenerational wealth. They are leaving this money for the grandchildren. So they have a 30-year view, and that's why they know that the only thing that makes sense with that kind of perspective is owning businesses. And so it really depends on the context. And that's really what we need to, as advisors, as distributors, really try and figure out when we talk to clients, that what is the context within which we are having the conversation of investments. So the context could be entirely different when the client says, okay, I've got 4 lakhs to invest and I need it in 6 months. And that 4 lakhs is maybe just 2% of his portfolio, or that 4 lakhs is his life savings. So really, it's all about context, and age is just another indication that one can use to modify or guide the client down a particular path, because many times clients don't know how much risk are they really willing to take. It's only when they start experiencing that the downside volatility, that's when they understand what experiencing the risk really means. So we see that risk profiles change, and like goal planning, while that's like Amit talked about, investing with goals, that's so important, but it's so difficult to adhere to, especially when there is, let's say, a big rally in the market, and then you suddenly get tempted to change your investment strategy, or there's a big crash in the market, and then you want to panic, and then you do like Manish talked about, greed and fear cycle. So really, it's about discipline as well. So coming back to just summarizing the point, age is just one factor amongst many.
In fact, just to add to it, Amit, I just want to add to the same question about what role does age play, and also, as Gautam mentioned, the context, the profile of the investor is very, very essential. But have you noticed, if for an investor, you also deal with a lot of clients, a lot of family, couples also. In your experience, goals also keep changing. I mean, there's a possibility that one may have started with a certain goal, but there's a new member in the family, or maybe another life event that might, have an impact on the goals. Then what is the strategy? What is the way out for investors? What they should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, wonderful question, Pallavi. I did 2 shows last week, and both the shows were titled Important Lessons About Life That We Have Learned in Last 1.5 years. It was a big transition for all of us. We suddenly have reprioritized our life purpose, our life care, and our lifestyle expenses. If you broadly classify your goals into these 3 categories, a lot has changed in last 1.5 years. Mm-hmm. So when you are going through a change and you're trying to reset your life, and if you're trying to reset your life from your life purpose point of view, you could be in a capital protection mode, irrespective of the age. It doesn't matter whether I'm 40 or 50 or 60. If I'm doing a big change, mm-hmm. in my career, I need to protect my money until the time I am set in my new career. If I'm changing my lifestyle, then I reprioritize my expenses, and something that I've kept aside for a travel budget is something that I can set free now to go into my retirement portfolio. If I'm retiring in next 3 years or 4 years or 15 years or 20 years, accordingly, my SIP calendar exposure would change. A lot has changed. I must call out, given the age that we are dealing with, the youngsters, particularly people in 30s, early 40s, are no longer thinking the same way that people like us or people are, like our parents used to think.
Right.
Where there was a lot more focus and stability. Not that is not the case now. The world is changing fast, and people want to have faster gratification of their important goals. So based on your life stage, which is very important, determined by whether you're single or married, whether you are entrepreneur or a salaried executive, whether you're planning to do early retirement and switch over to something which is more aligned to your purpose and passion, based on your life stage, based on your psychometric risk profile, based on your age and the horizon, you take that call, how much you need to invest in different asset classes. It has become a routine process. If somebody has a financial advisor onboarded, they must review their entire life goals at least once in 6 months or once in a year. And if there is a big change, capital protection comes in the picture. And at that time, we may have to become more conservative with respect to our investment. So it's a big conversation, and I don't know whether I answered your question, but this is a very long drawn conversation when we do it.
Right. In fact, there are many legs to it, and just I want to take views from the other panelists as well. Kaushik, we're addressing the the current scenario, not in just in terms of the market scenario, but also how life has changed now. Our priorities are changing. Your observations on the kind of behavioral change that you're noticing, and maybe your views on how important is age and profile for an investor.
Yeah. So a couple of points here, Pallavi. One is I think age, and like my fellow panelists already highlighted that it's all about perspective. But I think one overarching rule that's important is which can't be stressed upon enough: start early, because you need to start saving early, and not just saving, investing. Because sometimes we are great savers but poor investors, right? We get into suboptimal sort of investment classes early on in your saving period, and I think that needs to be fixed. The other thing that we've seen, and which is probably a change brought up by COVID, and I can personally also vouch for it, is that we've become, at least for the first half, more prudent spenders, right? Earlier, you would probably be much more generous with your spending. I think we've taken, a lot of people have taken that step back and saying that others necessary expenditures I need to take. And it's a very interesting way of thinking about saving, which someone told me about. It's a very interesting formula that you can.
Make your computer easier to use.
So when you think about saving, it's always income less expenditure, and whatever you save from there, you try to invest or whatever, put in various investment opportunities, right? Someone suggested a very simple hack, and it's a behavioral hack that why don't you flip the equation and say, let me fix my savings first and then decide how much can I spend.
Right.
If you do that, and you start early, there are enough in most studies done that if you started 10 years later in your life in terms of investing, even if you invested 2x more or 3x more, you actually didn't end up making or saving enough at the end of 25 years, as opposed to having started earlier in your life. So I think these are the things that people are coming to acknowledge and realize, but a lot more, sort of work needs to go around. And I think, advisors, they're just not advisors about the product, they're behavioral coaches. If you can't do it yourself, I think can't be stressed upon more, because investors think of it, I can go and buy funds or, buy stocks myself, but that buddy in helping you navigate through these interesting times or these tough times, I mean, that's invaluable. So I think, investors should definitely think about, hiring a financial planner, a financial coach, whatever you might want to call them. I think that is a very important sort of, aspect when you come to your investing journey.
Right. In fact, Manish, I want to take your view on, since we're talking about the young investors and starting early, in this age of do-it-yourself investment and this whole instant gratification kind of a thing, how difficult is it to be a long-term investors, and what is the role, that investment advisors and fund managers and brokerage houses can play? I mean, of course, everybody needs an expert, but it takes a lot of effort to reach that point when we realize that, okay, I need to start making my investments, and I may not have that kind of experience, the kind of expertise where I can that can really help me in my long-term investments. Your views on this, Manish?
No, so I agree a lot, with what the fellow panelist had said earlier, that when you look at the generation, right, as we keep getting younger and keep going down the ladder in terms of the age profile, the risk appetite tends to go up, but the patience level typically tends to go down dramatically, right? And like you said, there is a tendency to get instant gratification and not really see things through to its logical end. Mm-hmm. But that's just not the case with the age profile. I think across the board, when you look at, in particular, equities as an investment class, it's slightly difficult. It's slightly specialized. You need constant monitoring. You need to stay on top of the companies. You need to stay ahead of the curve in terms of the event that are going to play out, because market typically tends to be more forward-looking. By the time you realize things that they are happening as a retail investor, the market has kind of already factored that in, and you realize that very painfully. And also, most of the times, people are not really aware about the exit strategy, right? It's very easy to get into a stock, into a sector, take a buy call. But most of the times, at least from personal experience, what I realize is that as a retail investor, you're not really sure when to get up. And this becomes even more important if you're a high beta investor, if you're a high risk investor investing in cyclicals. Timing the exits is absolutely important, right? It's probably the single most important thing that you can do. And from that perspective, I think having somebody who's specialized is very, very important. But I think the most important thing is that when you look at it as a medical profession, right, a doctor cannot operate on his own doctor, right? The hands will start shaking. You need somebody who's a little dispassionate. And that's where I think the role of a money manager comes in, that even if you made 20-30% loss on your portfolio and you realize that things can get worse from here, don't get married to that call, cut the losses out and switch the portfolio into something else. So I think there's a number of factors that come into play, but always advisable to have somebody professional to manage your money.
Right, right. Gautam, I feel you would second that and just add your inputs to this.
Sure, yes. So, it's about making sure that you have someone to provide a balancing factor to your emotional view. As an investor, if you're a hard-earned money, you're bound to get emotional. So you need someone, like Manish said, who can provide an objective opinion and tell you when they see that you seem to be married to an idea, or you seem to be taking decisions that do not reflect, that may not be in your best interest. So really, it's important to have that that individual in your life to help you. Obviously, if you have less experience and knowledge as an investor, then you need a lot of support in terms of fund selection as well. If it's not just about stock selection, it's about product selection. And really, as an investor, what you want to do is figure out how much money can I save and for how long, and ideally leave the rest to someone else to manage.
Right.
And that's if you can find a partner like that who can help with the rest of it, then all you need to worry about is, why is money important to you? What are your goals? How much can you actually save for them, and how long are you comfortable, being away from your money? So, those are the real key decisions that investors should focus on, and leave the rest, to people that they can trust, to organizations and platforms that they are comfortable with, where they can see that there is a certain process followed, there's a certain approach that they find credible and they're comfortable with.
Right. Amit, we've spoken on this, earlier as well. That keep the money decisions to you, as in, your goals to you, but keep the management part with an expert. I mean, that can really help. Any inputs, anything that you would like to add on this?
I think it's the behavior side which hurts an investor the most when it comes to growing your money. So if I talk about three very prevalent biases in our country, they are the bias of overconfidence, the bias of herd mentality, and the bias of risk averseness. From my practice, if I can manage these three biases of my clients or investors, I think we will probably make a couple of extra 100 basis points in a CAGR figure of our investors' portfolio. So these biases and the blind spots and the behavior side of the whole money management aspect, this cannot be done by yourself. So you do need an expert on your side who can help you manage your biases, who can help you become more objective and detached from the emotional side and make sure your money is working for you. At the end of the day, we are working hard and saving this money to ensure that we retire early or our goals are funded in a timely manner. Mm-hmm. In order to overcome your biases, you need an external hand, and only an advisor who is very strong on the behavioral side management also can play a very instrumental role here. So my only bit is, more than the left brain quantifiable numbers, you need a lot more hand-holding on the right brain behavioral side of the aspects of money management, for which an expert definitely adds tremendous value once he's on board. That's my 2 cents on this.
Sure. So as we move on to the second half of this discussion, I would like to, highlight some key trends, some, emerging trends that we've seen. And Kaustubh, my question is to you now. There's a lot of buzz around sustainable investing. So, in fact, we've seen a deluge of ESG funds coming up, ESG themed funds. How do you look at this trend, and how can it really help in diversifying one's portfolio? Your views, Kaustubh.
Sure. So, if you look at from an Indian context, right, I think we're glad we're having this conversation because it's still kind of, baby steps from a sustainable investing perspective from a fund or, even from stock perspective for investors. Globally, we're seeing this trend play out over the last decade. It's been huge for ESG investing, led obviously by Europe, but when you look at US, other parts of Asia, in fact, we were just looking at data that just sustainable funds globally have grown to some 2.3 trillion, which is probably like 5x or whatever the Indian mutual fund industry, probably more than that, right? So I think the point is that this is something that the world is moving to. India has made its first steps. And when you think about sustainable investing, right, there are a lot of probably misconceptions attached with that. Look, I'm doing charity, I'm going to do a trade-off in terms of returns. But, it's not really that. When you think about ESG, as a concept, it's really about identifying risks, what we call environmental, social, and governance aspects of companies. And different companies from different sectors will be exposed to different kinds of risks. We think about an oil and gas company versus an IT company, very different sorts of risks, right? An oil and gas more on the environmental side, IT probably more on the human resources, the ES part of it, right? So the point is that these risks can bring in a financial impact to the company. So it's not only about doing the right things, but also thinking about when you're making an investment, are there any risks lurking from an environmental, social, or governance perspective that could impact the economic value of the company and cause damage? And we've seen so many of these instances, right? From a petroleum oil spill to the Facebook scandal, or the WeWork sort of corporate governance issues, and there are just so many more that have happened. So I think the point is, as investors, globally, and even Indian fund managers and other equity fund managers are realizing that these challenges or these risks need to be taken cognizance of, and look at how companies are working towards managing these risks. So it's not about that, there's a risk, it's there, but how are companies, what are the steps they're taking to mitigate? Obviously, you can't do away with them completely, but you can manage parts of the risk. And that's, I think, the important sort of needle that fund managers as investors are looking to move, even through what we call active ownership, by voting in favor of, some of these corporate policies or measures that the management can take to get sort of improve on some of these risks that they would be exposed to as a business.
Right. In fact, Manish, there has been a sudden discussion again about active versus passive investing, though these instruments have been there for some time. Your observations, and before I'll take views from Gautam on ESG and all about this sustainable investing. Your view on passive instruments and sustainable investing as such, as a concept.
Passive versus active investing, right?
Right.
Yeah. So passively active is how I would want to put it as an investment style. Okay. See, sometimes what happens is if you have to have the right amount of churn in the portfolio. If you churn the portfolio too much, I think things tend to go for a little bit of a toss. You try to time the cycles absolutely accurately all the time, and I think that's essentially something that goes against you. As an investor, I think what you really need to do is to identify good bets and through business cycles stick with them. At least that's what I try to do. Identify the short-term cycles from a long-term structural issues, and then take your bets accordingly, right? If it's a really a long-term structural problem that you're finding in a company, that's when you kind of take a hard call and cut your losses out and get out of it. But if it's just a short-term business cycle, interest rate, or the economy going through a tougher phase, and you still are confident about the industry growth or the management and everything, then I think you kind of stick on to it. That's how I look at it. So passively, a fund that is passively actively managed.
Great. Gautam, your views, and also how do you look at the trend emerging in India? Because this has, majorly been a global trend, but now it's catching up in India, and we've seen a lot of ESG funds, brought up by a lot of fund houses. Your views?
Okay, so I think it's a two-part question. First is the active versus passive debate, and then about ESG. So I think India is a growing market. There's a lot of alpha generation opportunity. While the passive market has a long way to go in India, it will definitely grow. But as long as there is enough alpha generation demonstrated by fund managers and products out there, that will be the dominant segment. And I think in terms of access to information, barring the largest companies, I think there is still a lot of value add that good old stocks research and company level and management level due diligence that people do, and that generates a lot of value, and that's why the smart managers are able to generate good alpha. So on the active versus passive side, I think a retail investor should favor the active side currently for his or her India investments. When it comes to sustainable investing, like Kaustubh said about the last decade, ESG is a 15-year plus old concept, and it's played out quite well. In fact, people now are moving away from ESG onto full impact investing. But ESG investing is something that I would say relatively new to India, and Sharekhan by BNP Paribas has actually tied up with Morningstar. We are amongst the first to offer ESG ratings of Morningstar, of different funds and stocks on our platforms, because we believe it's the way forward for all our investors. And like Kaustubh said, it's basically another way of managing risk, right? So why would you want to invest in a company despite profits? Why would you want to invest in a company if you knew there were governance related issues? Right. Why would you want to invest in a company that wasn't socially responsible, that wasn't future proof, right? So those are really the kind of questions that investors are asking, and actually we were always practicing ESG investing. It's just that now we've got a moniker for it, and we've got a process to identify and rate and kind of make it easier for the retail investor to understand that. So I think it's here to stay, and it'll only get sharper and better over time, and especially with the way climate change is now becoming center on most topics, that is just going to pick up more and more steam.
Sure. Amit, your observations on this new trend, and you think that the young investors, the new investors, are much more aware because they want to invest in companies that are socially more responsible, and they're very much particular about governance and other environmental issues. Your take?
Yeah, I mean, with awareness comes the change in investing trends. So people are now more aware about ESG investing. We financial advisors are far more equipped with technical details that, for example, Morningstar, I have a Morningstar research tool. We get a lot of information from Morningstar team, the research team, about ESG investing. So we definitely use that information and accordingly add these schemes and mutual funds to our clients' portfolios. In terms of passive versus active, I tend to agree with Gautam that there is still alpha that active guys are producing over passive, but there is an increasing trend of passive investing adoption. So sometime back, there was an increasing trend from regular to direct plans, which is still evident. And I see an increasing trend from active to passive. And if you're making a very two-layered equity portfolio, core and satellite, then definitely passive and large cap funds fit into your core part of the portfolio, and then the other parts ESG or multi-cap or flexi-cap, they go and fit into the satellite part of your portfolio. But I tend to agree with the Morningstar panelist and Gautam on how the trends are changing and how we still have some alpha left in active management funds, and we shouldn't stop investing in active yet. Our markets are not that efficient as the efficiency that we see in US or other parts of the global markets. We still have some room for improvement. The efficiency is yet to increase and make it even better. So we will see a slow and gradual adoption of passive continuously. But I don't know when passive will overcome completely the active part. I can't predict that, but there is some runway for that to happen still.
Sure. Manish, anything that you want to add on to this conversation about active versus passive, and how do you look at the trend of sustainable investing in India versus global markets like maybe the US?
So, I by and large agree with the fact that the way environmental concerns are manifesting themselves, right, and the way we are experiencing the climate change impact in and around us, right, and not just too far away from home. You look at the way, winter rainfalls and floodings have become a regular affair in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh every year, and the way these climatic changes are happening in and around us. I think one big change that is going to happen, right, and I see that playing out in the next 10 to 15 years, is that so far, if you look at the last 2 decades, a lot of global research was driven by commercial interests, right? So you saw a lot of technological evolution which happened on the telecom side, a lot of technological advancement which happened on the LED side, et cetera, et cetera. But renewable energy hardly saw any investment at all, right, in comparison to that. But now you have big amount of money coming into it, and there is a realization that the way things are going and the way weather patterns are changing and climate impact is being felt, sustainability in itself, renewable energy in itself can be a big commercially viable business, and right, big ticket investments are being visible over there. So this is going to be the way of future, and you have to take that into account, that when you have a view on corporate governance on a stock, it has to be a 360-degree all-encompassing view. It just doesn't get limited to financial responsibility, right? There is a certain environmental responsibility that also befalls on your head as a large ticket industrialist or a business owner, and you need to be aware of that. There's just no excuse on that front. So I'm absolutely sure that this is going to be the trend of the future in the next couple of decades.
Great. Coming back to you, Gautam, we've talked a lot about this ESG funds and sustainable investing. Also want to bring to light global funds and then this interest of investors now. Can new investors explore this? Like if someone wants to, start his investment journey, can global funds, ESG funds, or maybe some other types of funds, in your opinion, be a good starting point?
Yes, I think absolutely. There's no problem in starting off with global funds, while all of us have a very strong home country bias, and we understand our companies and our stock markets better here. So traditionally, we see clients investing a large portion of the portfolio in India, but gradually we've started seeing the offshore fund, mutual fund category actually grow significantly, and a lot more funds coming in, a lot more interest coming in, thanks to the likes of Tesla and Alphabet and all the talk related to metaverse. So there's obviously significant returns that people have generated, especially in the US markets, and that is also attracting a lot of investors there. So as part of our overall allocation strategy, definitely yes. And I would say the one thing that most retail investors find comfortable is if they have a good financial goal, which is related to, let's say, expenditure in US dollars. So they like to invest in offshore funds, because then they say, okay, this investment anyway is going to take care of my offshore expenditure that is going to happen 10 years from now. So that is, I see a lot of investors justifying it to themselves to like that, because they say, instead of taking the currency risk at the time of expense, I might as well live with it for the next 10 years and invest in the top companies of the world. So access to the largest companies in the world, I think that is also another really attractive quality about investing globally. So yes, I would say definitely something to invest in as part of your overall allocation strategy in finances.
So since we have a couple of more questions before we close this discussion, Amit, we've already discussed a lot about new investors, but are there any 2 cents for pro investors who've been there in the market, who've seen the ups and downs and seen different cycles? What major change you think should they be making in their investment strategy at this point?
I would say no major change in investment strategy. Just be aware of your holding period or your horizon of goals. If your goal is 8 to 10 years away from today or longer, definitely have an equity exposure in your portfolio. The standard rule of asset allocation holds very much true even today. So if you have already figured out how much of equity exposure, how much of fixed income exposure you want to keep in that particular financial goal or a portfolio earmarked for that goal, just stick to that asset allocation rule that you established. And when the markets are up and down, you just have to rejig. You just have to rebalance your portfolio. That is a very powerful algorithm or a principle of investing that really has stood the test of times and will still play out well. So no major change. Just work on your biases. Make sure that you're not doing any herd mentality actions, or make sure that you're not being too risk averse, because post-tax returns are very important. I see that a very common trend in women. They want to conserve their capital and they end up losing money to inflation. So some literacy and some empowerment initiatives need to be carried out for women in terms of making sure that they're exposing their money to fixed income in the capital markets. But other than that, no major change. Market has its nature of the market to go up and down. It's not new that we are witnessing. Maybe the turnaround times are shorter than what it used to be. But if you're aware of the market behavior, you will be making a good call with respect to how to manage your portfolio when you're working with a financial advisor.
Sure.
That's my 2 cents.
Sure. Kaushab, what would be your piece of advice for the existing investors, maybe with a 10-year or longer horizon? Any change they need to make, or as Amit said, no major change required in the current scenario?
So, I would broadly agree with what Amit said, and you rightly put it that you don't really need to reinvent the wheel. I think it's just continue what you're doing, follow the basic principles of investing. Just one additional thing that probably want to highlight, which is sometimes gets missed by investors, is the concept of what we call glide path investing, right? When you think about a goal, because you've got a set time horizon, remember asset allocation, while you start with a certain asset allocation, you have to also think about how would that asset allocation change over a period of time as you near your goal? Because that risk that you could potentially run, I'll just give you an example. Suppose you had a 10-year investment horizon, since you're new to that period, back in March of 2010, and said, look, I have 10 years, let me be an equity-heavy portfolio. But if you stuck to that equity-heavy portfolio come March 2020, you would have a significant drawdown in your portfolio value. So you would have to do one of two things. Either you extend your portfolio investment horizon because your portfolio value eroded by 30-40%, although you probably met it back in February of 2020 before the crash. Or you could have slowly started selling out of the more volatile asset class, which is equities, and start moving into your more conservative asset class, which is something like fixed income, or gradually start with and probably steepening it out. But again, it will depend on what your end goal was. If you've already met it, you should get a little more conservative. I think that's one probably thought process that I would ask investors to inculcate, because that often sometimes probably gets ignored. It's good to have the end goal in mind, but also think about the path that you would take to reach your end goal, not just at the starting, but through the middle and towards the end.
Right. Manish, your piece of advice for investors who have been there in the market, been there, done that, anything for them?
Yeah, so I think there's some bit of a change which is needed, is how I would put it. See, if you look at India's journey in the last couple of decades in terms of how we've done and how we've grown, obviously, with the kind of infrastructure investments that we made at the beginning of the millennium, we saw the economy grow at a very rapid pace for a very long period of time. Before the last 6-7 years, we've seen things go from one catastrophe to the other. It's always been, since 2015 till now, about expectations and those expectations not being met, right? Now, finally, you are evolving, and the new era is dawning where, for some foreseeable future of time, India is going to be amongst one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Things look like they are kind of stabilized. The other thing that you've got to reconcile with the fact is going to be that in India, the low interest rate regime is going to be here to stay. So if your goal is to beat inflation by a very wide margin, then that might not be the most ideal sort of an investment that you're looking at from a 2, 3 or 5 year perspective at this moment. So the way the economy is going to evolve going into the next 10 years is something that you have to keep in mind. The kind of sectors that did well in the last 7, 8 years might not ideally be the kind of sectors that are going to do well in the next 7, 8 years, 10 years. And the fact that, the risk perception of debt and the ability of debt investments to beat inflation has kind of undergone a massive, massive change. So these are the 2 things that you'll need to really keep in mind before taking, fresh investment decisions from the next 10 years perspective.
Sure. So before I wind up, there are a few live questions that we've received, and Gautam, if you would like to answer them, otherwise I'll pass it on. So the question is by Rishabh Gupta, and he says that how can I identify a stock or probably a sector to invest in, the purpose, and the purpose is for his sister's marriage in the next 5 years or so. He's got around 50,000 rupees in hand, and wants to achieve a goal of I think 10 lakhs. That's a massive one. Gautam, if you would like to answer this one.
Sure. So while I cannot tell you exactly which stock to invest in or which fund to invest in right now, but what you can do is just talk to any one of us or the companies that we represent, because for example, with Sharekhan by BNP Paribas, we've got at any given point of time products that are available that are extremely aggressive in nature, that can help you generate very high return. There are stock ideas at any given point of time with a target price and a stop loss, and like Manish had talked about, getting out at the right time. So we'll obviously tell you the next best idea that comes in play, as and when it comes. So every month we've got at least 15 or 20 tradable ideas, and this is all because of our large research team that does the ground level up research, supported by third-party research as well. So really, we've got a lot of such options. It's just about following the research advice or talking to someone like Amit, who has his own advisory setup, and getting to know which investments to which products or stocks to really invest in to make that kind of money.
Right. The few more questions, Amit, if you can take this one. This question says, in a long-term investment strategy of 7 to 8 years, there's a market crash similar to what happened in early 2020. What should investors be doing? What should be the approach? I think you've addressed that in the discussion, but if you can answer this one.
Yeah, it's the same thing that I was saying earlier. You can't predict the crashes, expect markets to be volatile. You have a good horizon, 8 years. So do a systematic investment plan on a regular monthly basis. Make sure your money is going into equity based on the asset allocation strategy or simple rule of asset mix that you establish for your financial goal. Mm-hmm. Don't worry too much about the markets going up or down. It's in the nature of the market to go up and down. You can't control that. The only thing you can control is your response, your investing principles, and in your investing strategy. And of course, control on your behavioral biases. If you have a good grip on all those 3-4 factors, you should do well with an 8-year horizon.
Sure. I think Kaustubh has a hard stop at 4:55. So I'm just passing on the question. Either Manish or Kaustubh can take it up. It's by Rajiv Das. He says, it's getting very difficult for investors to survive in this fast evolving market. There are things like, overpricing, inflation, and this new COVID variant, Omicron. So how does one survive in this difficult market? Any of you? Manish?
So maybe I'll just add my 2 bits and I'll let Manish give his expert opinion. I think, sometimes these are just distractions that we should, I would say just we need to have a horse blinds on and really focus on, my fellow panelists said, that really what is our goal? What do we want to do with the money? what is my horizon? Make a plan and stick to it. All of these things, you'll have various risks up in and out of the market, but really you need to focus on the bigger picture, which is, meeting your goals, not get too swayed by what's happening around you. Obviously, I mean, there's, get an advisor who can hold you through these times, because you as, might not be nuanced enough to actually understand or take calls. The advisor will help you do that. I think that's my very simple advice, to Rajiv. But I'll leave it to Manish, for his expert opinion on that.
Yeah,
no, I kind of agree. See, a lot of times it's just that, what he said, which is noise, right? We saw the way markets fell in the first wave versus the second wave, how the markets hardly reacted at all. So the market doesn't fall again and again and again for the same reason, right? The market tends to reinvent the reason to fall. And from that perspective, I think as a retail investor right now, what you need to do is to cut out all the noise and just be focused on the fundamentals. And I think things will take care of itself.
Sure. So indeed, it was a wonderful, insightful discussion. We covered almost all the questions and the concerns of investors. Since the time may not allow, we won't be able to take up more investor questions from here on. So I would like to thank each of the panelists for their precious time and for their insights on what investors should do in the current scenario. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaushal. Thanks.